Orwellian doublespeak and NATO-Russia tensions. Orwellian doublespeak, a concept derived from George Orwell's 1984, refers to the deliberate use of language to obscure, distort, or reverse meaning, saying one thing but meaning another, often to manipulate the public. This linguistic trick is often deployed in political discourse to justify questionable actions or policies, particularly during times of war and conflict. In the context of NATO's expansion and Russia's actions since 1990, both sides have employed forms of doublespeak to frame their actions in ways that serve their interests while concealing their true motivations. The growth and isolation of Russia. Since 1990, following the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russia has experienced a growing sense of isolation from Europe. The former Soviet republics, such as Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, along with ex-Warsaw Pact nations, quickly pivoted towards NATO membership, seeking security guarantees and distancing themselves from Russian influence. NATO's eastward expansion, which Russia has long viewed as a betrayal of informal agreements, added to its sense of being encircled and threatened. For over 30 years, the Kremlin has claimed that NATO's expansion was a form of aggression, while NATO insisted that it was merely a defensive strategy to stabilize Europe and provide security for newly independent nations. However, this framing by both sides contains elements of doublespeak. Russia describes NATO's actions as provocations and justifies its aggressive behavior by claiming it is defending against the encroachment of Western influence. Yet, Russia's invasions of Ukraine in 2014 and 2022 are described in Russian state media as peacekeeping or special military operations, downplaying the violent reality. NATO, on the other hand, presents its expansion as purely defensive, promoting peace and stability, though it is aware that every new member state further isolates and antagonizes Russia. NATO's rhetoric about open doors glosses over the geopolitical consequences of encircling a once powerful adversary. Finland, Sweden, and NATO's new dynamics. The Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 dramatically shifted Europe's security landscape. In response to Russia's aggression, both Finland and Sweden abandoned decades of neutrality and joined NATO, a major shift that signals growing apprehension towards Russia's ambitions. Finland, which shares a 1,300-kilometer border with Russia, and Sweden both concluded that neutrality was no longer viable in a world where Russia violates international norms with impunity. However, Russia's invasion was accompanied by more Orwellian doublespeak. The Kremlin claimed that its military actions were aimed at stopping Ukraine from joining NATO, portraying itself as the defender against Western expansionism. Yet the invasion prompted precisely the opposite result, with NATO expanding further to include Finland and Sweden, highlighting the self-defeating nature of Russia's narrative. The danger of escalation. The risk of direct conflict between NATO and Russia has steadily grown as the geopolitical chessboard has shifted. With NATO countries bound by Article 5 of the treaty, an attack on one is an attack on all, any misstep in Ukraine or on NATO's eastern borders could spark a broader war. Russia, increasingly isolated economically and diplomatically, has turned to countries like China and Iran for partnerships. Still, its alliances remain limited, and the economic fallout from its actions has deepened its isolation. Russia's isolation and NATO's expansion have become mutually reinforcing dynamics, with each side justifying its actions through narratives designed to obscure deeper strategic aims. Both rely on Orwellian doublespeak. Russia claims to fight for self-preservation and national security, while NATO describes its buildup as necessary for maintaining peace, even though the reality is that military posturing on both sides heightens the risk of war. Conclusion: doublespeak and the new Cold War. What we are witnessing is the return of Cold War-era strategies wrapped in new forms of Orwellian doublespeak. The expansion of NATO and Russia's increasingly aggressive posture reflect how power dynamics have shifted since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Both NATO and Russia frame their actions as defensive, but in reality, they are engaging in a complex geopolitical struggle for influence. The rhetoric on both sides masks the uncomfortable truth. Neither party can afford to show weakness, and the risk of miscalculation grows with every passing day. The tragedy, much like in Orwell's 1984, is that both sides claim to pursue peace while escalating conflict. Doublespeak becomes the language of diplomacy, blurring the line between peace and war, defense and aggression. If this situation continues, the world could find itself locked in a new Cold War, or worse, an open conflict, where Orwell's warnings about language, power, and manipulation are more relevant than ever.